Time. It's the only thing that's really truly yours. The only thing that can't be taken from you. We had time before the well-ordered world we had built gave way to chaos, before our societies crumbled, before our cities decayed, rotting like overripe pumpkins in the sun. Time seemed plentiful, now that everything we thought we had before is gone. Time is precious. Also rosemary, parsley, and oregano.
Hi everybody, and welcome to a very special pre-Halloween episode of Kettle and Bones, where we make really delicious, really healthy, really scary food. And you can too. Well, it's been a very peculiar year already, but unfortunately the general outlook has recently become even more bleak. You've seen it on the news, it may already have reached your neighborhood. The zombie apocalypse is upon us. And frankly, I'm not that thrilled about it. I'm looking out the kitchen window right now, and it's just a vacant wasteland with only the occasional undead shuffling by. There goes one. I'm pretty sure my family and I are the only living people left on our block. But we're staying positive. Today, we're going to jump right in to a recipe that, in these unprecedented times, I think is a very practical one. We're making a low-carb zombie head. Let's get cooking. We are going to use our lovely fresh herbs in just a moment, but first, let's talk about how we're going to put this together. This dish is kind of a catch-22. We're going to have to make a zombie head. Surprising in these times when you'd think zombie body parts would be most plentiful and available. But think about it this way. How do you kill a zombie? Exactly. You destroy the head and the brain. Many of the tools you may have on hand to accomplish this are not exactly surgically precise. That's why it's pretty much impossible to take a zombie head intact. So using as many authentic zombie ingredients as we can get our hands on, and substituting other ingredients where we must, we will be assembling one from scratch. Let's begin. The zombie's skull almost always ends up smashed to smithereens. I don't think I've ever seen one intact, so that's the first thing we'll be making. And it turns out, we already have a recipe in our back pocket that will give us a really good, really low-carb zombie skull. Remember when we made our soft and crunchy tacos? We made a simple almond flour-based dough that crisped up really nicely when we pan-fried it in avocado oil to make our taco shells. Well, it turns out that a very similar dough recipe will also bake into a nice, crisp shell. Check out the tortilla dough recipe in Series 1, Episode 19 for the full explanation, but very quickly, it consists of about a 5-to-1 mixture of almond flour to Lupin flour, and you could sub in coconut flour if you don't have Lupin flour. A few tablespoons of Xanthan gum. This is more than you're probably used to adding to most recipes. A dash of salt, and then whatever seasonings you want. For this dough, I'm going to add a little Everything Bagel seasoning. Next, some wet ingredients. For this quantity, I'm using 3 eggs. Oh, I forgot, with the dry ingredients, a little dash of baking powder. Let's add that now. There we go. Now we're going to add just a little bit of water. Not much though, just a splash to start. All we need is for this to form into a cohesive ball of dough. Okay, it needs just a little more water, just another splash. And that's good right there. Cover that and let it sit for about 10 minutes. Take this time to make sure all your doors and windows are secured, check your ammo, maybe weld some spikes onto the bumper of your car. You know, the new normal. 10 minutes later, we are taking our dough ball. I'm going to start with about half of it. And I'm going to roll this out on a surface that I know I can peel it off of easily, a cutting board, parchment paper, etc. This is pretty sticky dough, and that's why it's going to work so well for us. Today, I am not rolling this tortilla thin. I'm going for maybe 3 to 5 millimeters thick. It's going to end up more like an almond cracker than a tortilla. And this doesn't have to be perfectly consistent, it doesn't have to have nice clean edges, we just want a big sheet of dough. Now, we'll be getting a little artsy-craftsy. On top of an inverted drinking glass, I'm placing a bowl. This is just to raise it up off the countertop. We're going to use this as a basic shape on which to model our skull. We need to cover this with aluminum foil as well. I'm using 2 big sheets of heavy-duty foil so that this is nice and strong. We're eventually going to be removing the bowl, and the foil layer will have to hold its shape on its own. If you're using the standard thickness aluminum foil, you might need 4 or 5 layers to make a really sturdy mold. Now we're going to peel up a sheet of our dough, as large a piece as we can get. Don't worry if it doesn't all hold together, mine didn't. Drape that over the foil mold, and we can start to shape it. I want to either press in any extra flaps of dough or simply remove them. I need the dough laying flat against our mold with no extra floppy parts. We also need the dough sheet to be just a little longer in the front where the face will be, and a little shorter toward the back. That's more or less the shape of most human skulls. On the slightly longer side, let's form the face by cutting out a nasal passage and 2 ocular cavities. That is to say, nose and eye holes. That's pretty good. This dough is really pliable, so you can mold it, add or remove little pinches where needed, almost like clay. I'm going to continue shaping the back and sides of this so that it looks skull-shaped. And to that end, I'm also going to add a few pinches of dough to the brow to give the eye sockets a little more depth and make the face just look more realistic. By the way, don't worry about that divot on the top of the skull that's being caused by the bowl. That's going to go away in just a second. Okay, we have a good basic skull shape, so now we can start to refine it. I'm going to take the bowl off of the inverted glass, and being careful not to stretch or tear the dough, I'm removing the bowl from beneath our tinfoil mold. And if I place that gently back on top of the inverted glass, the weird flat spot on top will be pressed up, giving us a more normal head shape. We're now going to carefully shape both the dough and the tinfoil that's holding it in place to make our skull just a little bit more natural looking. Most human heads are a little more elongated front to back, so I'm gently pressing the sides to make that happen. This is the time to reshape any weird bumps that there may be. You can also add some definition to the cheekbones, whatever you think. This is your chance to realize your vision of the ideal zombie head. This is looking pretty good. I'm going to put the whole assembly, glass, foil, and all, into an oven-safe dish, and into the oven at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, that's about 149 degrees Celsius. The whole thing is going to go into, it's not going. It's not going to fit. Well, the foil mold is pretty solid. I think it can go in without the glass underneath it, and it will still hold its shape long enough to cook. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. We need to give this at least 45 minutes to an hour. Your actual cooking time will depend on how thick your layer of dough is and how brown and crispy you want it to be. This is really tasty when it's a nice, deep, toasted brown. Remember, we can't rush the cooking of almond flour. It will burn if you're not careful and get that bitter, burnt nut flavor that nobody enjoys. If you have a convection setting on your oven that blows the hot air around in there, use it. It will help the sides of the skull cook evenly with the top. We want a nice, golden, toasted, nutty brown color on this whole thing. Back at the counter, while our skull is cooking, we're going to work on some of the other components we'll need to put this all together. Into a bowl, I'm placing 2 packages of cream cheese. I don't think I'll need to use quite all of this, but I definitely don't want to have too little. We're going to make a delicious flavored cream cheese to spread on the skull. So we'll essentially end up with a nutty, crispy cracker layer with a delicious cream cheese spread on it. It's going to be great. So let's bring our herbs back out. Starting with our rosemary and thyme, let's separate the leaves from the woody stems. Same for the oregano and parsley. And let's add some scallions to this as well. I'm going to finely chop everything together. I really don't want any large chunks of anything remaining in our cream cheese. I'm also going to add in a few cloves of our easy roasted garlic. You can check out Series 1, Episode 11 to see how we made that. Super simple and easy. I'm now mixing all of this very well. By the way, if you've added your cream cheese while it's cold and you're having a little difficulty mixing it, you could place this bowl into a larger bowl that's full of warm water, just for a few minutes until things in here get soft enough for you to mix easily. Let's add some salt and fresh pepper to taste. And this is done. Let's check in on our skull. Looking good. We have a nice bit of browning happening. Let's get a closer look and make sure it's cooked throughout. Very nice. It's firm and crispy all over. It's definitely cooked enough to hold up to our cream cheese and other toppings. This must be toasted thoroughly so there are no soft, flexible spots left on it. If it's underdone, it will get soft and bendy when we add our toppings. Make sure this is solid all over. You can let it go to an even deeper brown color than this if you prefer. That gives it a toasty flavor that's really nice. Just don't let it burn. Keep it low and slow. This is just right for me, though. We need to let this cool at room temperature for at least 30 minutes until the surface is no longer warm. Once that has happened, we're going to take our cream cheese and, using a soft implement, spread it all over the skull. We're going to coat the entire thing with a substantial layer. Again, if you think of the skull as a cracker, you want to have a layer of cream cheese that is appropriately thick and delicious on each cracker piece. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, zombie heads aren't filled with cream cheese. Zombie head goo has more of a buttery consistency. Everybody knows that. Yeah, well, congratulations on your mail-order zombology degree. Look, we need this to glue on our next layer. Even if I did venture out into the wasteland and forage some authentic zombie cranial goop, it just wouldn't do the job here. And I would argue that the fluid from a genuine zombie head, while nutritious, would taste less good than our nice herbed cream cheese. Okay, we've laid down a great thick layer of zesty, creamy, delicious connective tissue. Now it's time to add some flesh. Again, if you can't get fresh zombie skin tissue off a real zombie, go ahead and use the pre-packaged stuff. This is a package of nice uncured animal meat that I scavenged from the back storeroom of a burnt-out convenience store. Generally, you want to start layering from the bottom up so that the flesh hangs on the face, held in place by the cream cheese at the top of each piece rather than the bottom. Also, before we cover up too much of this with meat, I want to add a little more realism with some seeds in place of teeth. Pumpkin seeds, especially, have pretty much the right shape and size, so they stand in really nicely as a row of crooked, broken teeth. Terrific. And let's put what remains of an upper lip on there. That's good. And I'm just going to continue grafting hand-torn strips of meat, one at a time, onto the face. All right, this is looking pretty horrifically great. We're getting close. I have a bed of green lettuce leaves on a serving tray here. I want to serve our zombie head resting on this nice green leafy background. We will, of course, need to remove the foil mold that has provided the structure for our head. It should now be able to hold its shape on its own, especially if you let the skull get good and crispy in the oven. The best way to remove the foil is to crinkle it in on itself. Carefully flip the head over and just start pinching and squeezing the foil inward. In doing so, it will peel away from the interior of the head. You don't want to pull it aggressively or twist it. That could easily break the cracker-like crust of the skull. There we go. This is already looking great. Let's see if we can add just a little more realism. I would like to see some eyeballs in those sockets. So I'm going to use a couple of rambutan fruits. Rambutan is a fruit from Southeast Asia, really similar to lychee if you've ever had those. If you peel off the spiky exterior, the interior fruit is an off-white orb that's terrific as a milky, dead eyeball. The fruit has a smooth end and then kind of a puckered end where the stem attaches. It's up to you which one of those you prefer to have face outward. For purposes of demonstration, I'll do one of each. Now, rambutan actually aren't that low in carbohydrates. Each of these fruits has about 1 to 1.5 grams of sugar, so they're strictly here for aesthetic purposes. If you don't want to use something like this, a good alternative would be something like a large green olive. That would make a pretty good dead, diseased eyeball with that 1,000-yard zombie stare. Or if you make the eye socket just a little bigger, I bet you could cram a hard-boiled egg in there. Be creative. You don't have to add eyeballs, of course, but I think it's a really nice effect. One last finishing touch to go. I'm brushing on just a little pesto. In addition to adding some really nice flavors of basil, olive oil, and pine nuts that go great with these meats, pesto gives that moldy, rotten, decaying look that just screams zombie. Excellent. We now have a zombie head that looks great from every angle. Getting hungry? Me too. Let's sample a bite of this, shall we? Just cut out a little square from the back here. There we go. What's this? Something inside? But how? Surprise! I snuck this in when you weren't looking. I took a pound or 450 grams of 80/20 ground beef, divided it in 2 halves, and formed these into lobes, seasoning with salt, pepper, and sage. I thought that would go nicely with the other herbs in the cream cheese. Then I seared the lobes in a very hot cast iron pan until they had a nice crust outside but were still pink on the inside. I like my zombie brains like I like my hamburgers, medium rare. Looks like this zombie was slightly right-brained. A creative type, perhaps. Right-brained? Left-brained? Sculptor? Architect? Mathematics? Drama? Okay, enough silliness. I added the seared zombie brain to the plate and spooned on a little no-sugar added tomato sauce. This is just crushed tomatoes, garlic, salt, pepper, olive oil, and a few basil leaves. Same as the sauce we made for our pizza episode. Then I covered it with the finished head, and no one is the wiser. It's just a little fun treat for people to discover when they first crack into this bizarre little appetizer. Plus, I think the irony is perhaps the most delicious thing about this. I mean, it's me eating the zombie's brains.
Well, well, Mr. Zombie. It appears the tables have turned.
Of course, if you and your guests are not as into medium rare meat as me, this could be anything. You could hide a little bowl of your favorite dip under there. Maybe artichoke or some roasted garlic and olive oil. Anything you like. And that is it for our deeply disturbing yet thoroughly tasty zombie head appetizer. Seasoned meats and a flavorful cream cheese atop a nutty cracker crust. And all at an almost negligible carb count. Well, folks, the post-apocalypse is looking up. Sure, the world's a little topsy-turvy right now, but I'm hanging in there, snacking on my zombie head, staying safe. I hope you are too. Oh, excuse me, sounds like I have company. Might get to do one of these with authentic ingredients after all. Have fun this weekend, be safe, and be sure to stay with Kettle and Bones for many, many more great low-carb recipes throughout this upcoming holiday season. But for now, just enjoy your low-carb zombie head. Coming!